Cosby's Super Huey, released in 1985, is one of those early flight simulations which I happen to have a lot of fond childhood memories of. Developed by none other than Paul Norman of Forbidden Forest fame, it gives the budding pilot the opportunity to pilot an advanced, fictionalized version of the classic Huey helicopter. The box is pretty light for a simulation. The content's really just the disc, at least in my case. The game was also released on tape, along with its instruction booklet, which, whilst being slimmer than you'd expect for a general flight simulator, still provides enough detail to get any budding pilot up to speed. Bringing the game up, first thing you get is the introduction sequence, which really shows off those credits in a fairly unique manner. Before the 1541 spins back into life and loads the first of 4 scenarios available. Flight instruction. This one is about showing the ropes of flying a helicopter, starting with powering the systems up, then engaging the engine, and finally getting it off the ground, going for a short flight around the zone, then bringing it in for a nice gentle landing. Where most simulators of the era only provided scant instructions in a cassette inlay, Super Huey wins by making this entire experience interactive. Each required action the pilot needs to take is presented on the flight computer, and as you satisfy each one, the next is presented to keep you focused on what you should be doing. This guided experience is a really wonderful way to learn the ropes. Honestly, I think it does such a wonderful job that once any pilot gets a few flights under their belt, they should be at the stage where they feel comfortable enough to take on the other scenarios. Like exploration, which provides a free environment for flying about. Now, this one doesn't have a formal goal as such. It's really only about just flying around the world map at your leisure, though the instructions do encourage you to go wild and map out the area. And yes, that means it's time to get your notepad and pen and try to note down as many features as you can find. The instructions also encourage you to send those maps to Cosby when you're done. But considering that was 30 years ago, don't get your hopes up for a response anytime soon. Truthfully, I feel that this is one of those tasks that's really suited for the most devoted of players. Alongside your trusty mapping pad, you do get some assistance from the flight instruments. They provide a bearing back to your home base, but you can also query a computer for the distance from there. It's quite the old school way of tracking your location, but one that, if you've played a lot of other simulators of the time, is probably a technique you're more than familiar with. The thing is, for me, I find something a little too realistic, as you need eagle eyes to keep on top of your explorations, and after a while, when you start staring into the same blank landscape with the same sprites looping through, it starts to become a bit too much of a chore. When you've had your fill of mapping, you can try your hand with Rescue, the first of the more challenging scenarios offered up. Here, you'll be taking the Huey through a snowy mountain range to locate a party trapped deep inside. The journey is treacherous, but if you manage to make it to the lost party, you have 2 options: attempt a risky landing to pick them up, or simply to just relay their position back to your home base. Let's talk flying in dangerous conditions. Thankfully, unlike other simulators, you've always got clear visibility. And the challenge is really more about avoiding the rapidly shifting landscape whilst keeping an eagle eye on your bearing indicator. Also, keeping an eye on your distance and using the ground track display to ensure you're closing on the right location. Now, ultimately, this really is the point where Super Huey's innovative control system starts to come undone for me. Here, what they've done is try to put the 4 primary flight controls of a helicopter onto a single C64 joystick. And that sounds like it's going to be more flexible, but at this point, when you face a rapidly closing peak, and to avoid it needing to slow down, turn away, and raise your altitude all at the same time, it's pretty much impossible. From my experience playing, this was sadly quite common. 1 minute, you're flying safe and clear, the next, boom. Death by mountainside. As a cliff would appear, and you just wouldn't be able to react in time. And that's, well, pardon the pun, the tip of the mountain. When you finally find the trapped party, it's time to bring it in for a landing. Now, this is where things are ramped up even further. First step is to bring the helicopter to a stop. Pretty straightforward. Then, descend onto the land. Now this is where it gets quite scary. Much like general flying about, the mountains will close in as you descend down. As for avoiding a fatal collision, well, it's really about controlling your descent rate. Keep descending until the mountains close in, then start to pull up until they separate, and keep repeating that until you safely touch down. I guess I'm not cut out for flying rescue missions, but in the end, I really found myself frustrated by the way the mountains are represented. At least in the way that they just close in way too quickly, and it's not all that realistic, and doesn't really do a good job of giving you a sense of space. At long last, we finally get to let the Huey off its leash. With the final scenario on offer, combat. This one puts you in yet another desert base, where you'll be running a defensive operation. The base is being threatened by an enemy force which is made up of tanks and helicopters. Thankfully, they'll only start to engage you once you've left the safe zone, a 10-mile circle around the home base. As long as you keep above 500 feet, all you'll need to deal with are the enemy helicopters. But the moment you go below that, they'll be backed up by the enemy's tanks now joining the fray. Where rescue was about testing your skills with both the flight stick and the navigation systems, combat is all about mastering your flight computer in rapidly switching in and out of weapons mode. Thankfully, when in weapons mode, the Huey is armed with both machine guns and rockets. So flying along, thinking you've got a beat on a target, out of the blue, a helicopter appears, and boom, you're shot down. The systems are a real big letdown here. As you can only activate one system at a time, you'll be frantically punching in command codes to alternate between your navigation systems and your weapons control. And even the fastest typists out there can't really outwit AI gunnery skills. And that's kind of the crux of it for me. As a kid, I had a lot of fond memories playing this game. I borrowed a copy from a friend, which was just the cassette, and taking the Huey up, learning the basics of flying it, and generally exploring the world. Even after all this time, still feels pretty good. The experience is really helped by the way the flight engine is implemented, using the C64's hardware sprites to simulate ground objects flying past you at a far faster rate compared to other, more advanced simulators. If you kind of just want to sit in a helicopter, fly around, not worry about targets or complex missions, it kind of is enjoyable for that. The exploration mission is great for freely roaming about, and once you've gotten the hang of the takeoff sequence, you're not really going to have to wrestle with the controls much. But on the other hand, both the combat and the rescue scenarios are really where the game falls down. Whilst, as a kid, I had no real idea how they played. I didn't have an instructions booklet, but looking at them with fresh eyes and the manual to hand, I find them really infuriating. The mountainous terrain of rescue is just far too unfriendly. It's far too hazardous. And sure, that's the point of the scenario, but at the same time, there are more simulators to do a far better job of representing 3D space, which would mean you'd have a better chance of avoiding death by mountainside. But funnily enough, combat is a letdown for the opposite reason. You spend way too much time focused on your instruments and your flight computer switching between tracking your target and trying to engage it. And you'll repeatedly get into a position, a target will spring up, and you just can't react fast enough to switch modes properly and take it down. Honestly, a flight computer which relies on 3-letter action commands for all your actions outside of the engine is not really the best interface for a helicopter which you might deploy into a combat zone. At least for me. If you're willing to put up with that overly complex computer interface, and you don't mind keeping it to exploration, you can have quite a chilled experience here. But if you want to channel your inner Stringfellow Hawk, Super Huey is not the game to do it. And you're probably best served by checking out something like Gunship. Now with that, I enjoyed this look. Super Huey is a bit of a more unique game out there, and one I don't think gets a lot of love, and well, I tried to show it a bit of love. So as always, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you enjoyed it, let me know some of your thoughts down below in the comments box. Do click the like button for thumbs up, it really helps this channel get a little more visibility out there. And finally, new videos come Friday. If you want to be on top of them as they do, hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.